Yesterday, on the 5th of November, a Honda Jet November 75 Hotel Papa attempted to reject a takeoff well above V1 takeoff decision speed at Mesa's Falcon Field near Phoenix, Arizona, resulting in fatalities. Here's what we know so far. We already have some airport surveillance video of the incident. Unfortunately, it only picks up the incident well into the rejected takeoff, the latter part of the takeoff, and it comes to us from ABC 15 News there in Mesa. And about there's the end of the runway, and then swerve off into Greenfield Road. So right away on this video, we see the brakes locked up and the smoke coming off of those wheel brakes. The aircraft departed the end of the runway at nearly 90 miles an hour. My name's Juan Brown. You're watching the Blanco Lirio channel. Here's what we know so far. Starting with the Aviation Safety Network, on Tuesday, 5 November, a Honda HA420 Honda Jet, owner-operator Iceman Holdings, LLC. Iceman Holdings appears to be an investment firm specializing in small startup companies. November 5-7 Hotel Papa, 4 fatalities, 5 occupants, 1 other fatality. These numbers may change as this is very preliminary information. They were taking off from Mesa's Falcon Field en route for Provo, Utah. The Honda HA420 Honda Jet November 5-7 Hotel Papa was destroyed when it crashed during the takeoff attempt from runway 22 left at Falcon Field, Mesa, Arizona. 4 occupants of the aircraft and the vehicle driver perished, and the pilot suffered serious injuries. So it sounds as though the aircraft hit a vehicle there on Greenfield Road, killing that individual. And it sounds like the pilot survived. ADS-B data suggests that the airplane had accelerated to about 133 knots ground speed before it aborted the takeoff roughly 3,400 feet down the runway. Remember, this is a 5,100-foot runway. The airplane was unable to stop, overran the end of the runway, and went through the airport perimeter fence before crashing into a vehicle on North Greenfield Road. A post-crash fire ensued. The estimated distance between the end of the departure end of the runway and the final resting position is 700 feet. Weather at the time was fine. Winds were calm. Temperature about 20 to 21 degrees Celsius, or about 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Our friend Victor over here at VAS Aviation already has a video out on the ATC audio from this crash. The Honda Jet was cleared for takeoff. The Honda Jet pilot read back the takeoff clearance, and that was the end, or the last that we heard from the Honda Jet. There was no call to ATC regarding rejecting the takeoff. In fact, ATC, the air traffic controller, or the tower controller here at Mesa's Falcon Field, didn't even realize the aircraft had crashed until an aircraft was departing behind the, cleared to take off behind the Honda Jet. He noticed the smoke off at the end of the runway, and he alerted the tower controller as to what had happened. Then they began to roll the trucks. So check out Victor's video here for the entire ATC conversation. The ADS-B data here on ADS-B Exchange shows what appears to be a normal acceleration up to a V1 takeoff decision speed, and rotate speed for this aircraft in these conditions should be a little over 100 knots. So right about here in this portion of the runway, this aircraft should be rotating and taking off. But here from 103 knots at 2338.47 all the way up to 133 knots at 2338.54, some 7 seconds later, the pilot elects to reject the takeoff and attempts to get the aircraft stopped. But by now he's going much too fast, well beyond V1 decision speed, with too little runway left behind, or left ahead of him, and departs the end of the runway at 89 knots, or nearly 90 miles per hour. Here's a picture of the accident aircraft, November 5-7 Hotel Papa. Honda Jet's a unique design. It's a small personal jet with two small turbofan engines, about 2,000 pounds of thrust each, that are mounted on the wings on pylons separated from the fuselage in this unusual kind of rear-mounted design. The jet is capable of carrying 4 passengers and 2 crew members up front for a total of 6 people on board with a maximum gross weight under 12,500 pounds, which allows you single pilot operations for this jet. If we look at the history, the accident history of the Honda Jet, this is the first accident in Honda Jet history that resulted in fatalities. There have been other numerous runway excursions and overruns with the Honda Jet, especially in wet conditions, with its anti-skid braking system being incapable of stopping the aircraft in some very slippery conditions. A quick look at the Google Maps at the Mesa Airport. There's the 5,000-foot long runway, and then the overrun area. And if we pop down here onto Greenfield Road, looking back towards the runway, we can see the overrun area. Then the aircraft went through this perimeter fence, then down this small embankment and onto the pavement of Greenfield Road and headed towards the orange fields beyond the other side of the road. The Honda Jet does not use traditional wing spoilers to spoil lift on the wings and aid in braking in a rejected takeoff. Wing spoilers will spoil that lift, remove the weight off of the wings, and get that weight onto the wheels and help you decelerate the aircraft. Instead, they have this spoiler system located in the tail of the aircraft to help increase aerodynamic drag, especially in the event of an emergency descent or when you need to get down quickly. I found a pilot operating handbook available here online on the Honda Jet. Unfortunately, it does not have any takeoff data in it. But if we look at this article from AOPA magazine, we can glean some of the numbers that are typically used on takeoff for the Honda Jet. And here in this article, it shows a V1 takeoff decision speed of about 110 knots. Again, these speeds vary based on the temperature, pressure, altitude, and the load on the aircraft. A rotation speed of about 115 knots indicated airspeed, and a V2 takeoff safety speed of 120 knots. So the idea behind these speeds, well, and looking at these overall numbers of the Honda Jet, this runway, a 5,000-foot runway, is an easy runway for this jet to handle. In fact, this jet can handle runways down as short as 4,000 feet safely. So the V1 takeoff decision speed is the maximum speed that you can accelerate to under 2 good engines and then decide to either reject the takeoff and stop in the remaining amount of runway distance available, or continue the takeoff and accelerate to V2 takeoff safety speed on one engine and climb away in the remaining amount of runway. So V1 takeoff decision speed is critical. If you need to reject a takeoff, you've got to do it before the V1 takeoff decision speed. If you elect to reject a takeoff after this speed, you will go off of the end of the runway. And the only case where a captain would ever want to consider rejecting the takeoff beyond V1 takeoff safety speed is if he feels that the aircraft is unable to fly. Is there some reason why the aircraft, in his opinion, will not fly? The rejected takeoff procedure in the Honda Jet here in the manual is quite simple. If an engine fails or another situation occurs that requires the flight crew to abort the takeoff prior to reaching V1, reduce the thrust levers to idle, apply the brakes, and extend the speed brake. The Honda Jet has a modern takeoff configuration warning light in the what I call the ICAS warning system. If the aircraft is improperly configured for takeoff, might be one of the reasons why the aircraft refuses to take off. And the takeoff warning system in the Honda Jet covers these systems. If the aircraft flaps, speed brake, or parking brake, or trims are not configured in the approved takeoff position, you'll get the takeoff warning light, or if the wing anti-ice temperature is below the normal operating temperature with the system on. So some of the common things that may cause problems on takeoff, like incorrect flap setting or having the parking brake set inadvertently, like we've seen before on some of the Cessna Citation jets, those errors should be trapped by this takeoff configuration warning on board the aircraft. The fact that the pilot survived will give investigators a good idea of what could have possibly led up to this accident, but the HondaJet does have the option available for a cockpit voice recorder and a flight data recorder. However, if this flight is operated under FAR Part 91, those items are not required to be in this aircraft. What about taking off with the flight control lock still in place? Well, in the HondaJet, the main flight control lock is a big giant red strap that wraps around the pilot's yoke, making it hard to even get into the cockpit of the aircraft. The only other possible control lock that could be an issue is the rudder control lock, just a small block on the rudder, but that would not prevent the aircraft from rotating for takeoff. So why did this pilot elect to reject this takeoff well above V1 takeoff decision speed? What was it about the aircraft that the pilot felt the aircraft was unable to fly? These are some of the things that the NTSB investigators will be looking at and trying to determine. Thank you so much for your support of this channel, especially the folks over on Patreon that make this content possible. See you here.